Millionaire CEO orders steak in German. He freezes when the waitress answers fluently. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Alex Donovan was not the kind of man who let things go unnoticed. As CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world, he was accustomed to people hanging on his every word, anticipating his next move. He was always in control, always the one who commanded attention. But today, as he sat in the quiet corner of a fancy Manhattan restaurant, something felt off. He wasn't sure what it was, but his mind was racing. The elegant surroundings did nothing to soothe his nerves. In fact, they made him feel more on edge than usual. He looked at his watch, then at the menu, but neither could hold his attention for long. He was distracted by something he couldn't quite place. It was just another dinner, another business meeting disguised as a social event. But Alex had always been someone who thrived on control, and right now, he felt anything but in control. He tapped his fingers on the table. The sound of his perfectly manicured nails clicking against the glass was the only thing that seemed to ground him. He had been expecting a simple meal, but now his mind kept drifting to something, someone, really, that he couldn't ignore. The waitress. Her name was Emily, and he had barely noticed her when she first arrived at his table, taking his order with the polite professionalism that all waitstaff were trained to do. But there was something different about her. He couldn't put his finger on it, but her quiet confidence had made a lasting impression. It was the way she carried herself, graceful, almost serene, and the way she moved through the restaurant, never rushing, always composed. She was different, and that was something Alex wasn't used to. He wasn't used to being intrigued by someone who didn't throw themselves at him, who didn't seek his attention. As he sat there, waiting for his food, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night was going to be different from all the others. He couldn't have known just how right he was. When Emily finally returned to take his order, Alex decided to test her, just out of curiosity. He had a tendency to test people, see how far they would go to please him. It was a game to him, and one he played often. I'll have the steak, medium rare, please. And a glass of red wine. Oh, and could you bring it to me in German? He smirked slightly as he said it, expecting her to stumble or at least hesitate. After all, who wouldn't be intimidated by someone like him? Emily looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Alex watched her carefully, waiting for the awkward pause, the nervous hesitation. But it never came. Instead, Emily simply nodded and replied in flawless German. Of course, Mr. Donovan. I will have your steak ready shortly, and the wine will be perfect with it. Alex froze, his smirk faltering. He hadn't expected that. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't intimidated. She had answered him fluently, as though speaking German was just as natural to her as speaking English. He stared at her for a moment longer, then quickly shook himself out of the daze. It was just a coincidence, he told himself. Just a random occurrence. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Emily than met the eye. He had to know more. Was she just a waitress? Or was there something else about her, something unexpected, that had caused him to stop in his tracks? Little did Alex know, Emily had a story that no one, least of all him, could have ever guessed. Alex couldn't stop replaying the moment in his head. Emily's calm, measured response had thrown him off balance, something he wasn't used to. He had expected her to falter, to hesitate, to look embarrassed as most people did when faced with a challenge like that. But instead, she had answered him confidently, without a second thought. It was as if speaking German was just as natural for her as speaking English. He couldn't quite shake the image of her, her poise, her composure. She wasn't like anyone else he had met before. Alex had always been the one in control, the one who set the terms, but for the first time in a long while, he felt out of his depth. He glanced at her again as she moved gracefully through the room, attending to other tables, her every movement purposeful and fluid. There was something about her that intrigued him. She wasn't flashy, she didn't seek attention. She just was. After his meal, as he was finishing his drink, Alex felt a strange pull to do something he rarely did. Ask questions, be curious. Normally, people were the ones who sought him out, trying to get close to his world, his power, but Emily. She was different. He had to know more. She approached his table again, carrying the check, her eyes briefly meeting his with that same calm expression. "Here's your check, Mr. Donovan," she said, her voice steady and pleasant. He could feel the shift in the air, that same sense of curiosity he had felt earlier still lingering in his chest. "Emily," he said, his voice softer than usual, causing her to pause and glance at him. "Can I ask you something?" She gave a small nod, her expression neutral. "Sure, Mr. Donovan. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure how to phrase it. "Where did you learn German?" Emily smiled faintly, her gaze thoughtful for a brief moment before she answered. "I studied international languages in college, but I had to leave the program for personal reasons." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Personal reasons?" "Yes," she replied, her tone calm, almost distant. "I had to take care of my family. My brother was sick, and I couldn't afford to keep up with school. So, I decided to make a living in other ways." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, something Alex couldn't quite place. It wasn't sadness, but there was an unmistakable weight behind her words. "That's admirable," he said, genuinely impressed. Emily simply nodded, her smile never wavering. She seemed to have no desire to go deeper into the subject, and Alex respected that. It made him more curious, though. What was it about her that made him feel this way? Most people, he could figure out within moments of meeting them. But Emily? She was a puzzle. "Well, it's a long story," she continued, breaking his train of thought. "But it's behind me now. I'm doing fine." Alex nodded, feeling a strange sense of respect for her resilience. It wasn't often he encountered people who seemed to carry themselves with such dignity despite the challenges they faced. He had always surrounded himself with people who were, in a way, extensions of his own success. People who were eager to align themselves with him, eager to gain something from their association. But Emily? She had nothing to gain from him, and yet, she treated him as an equal. He found that more refreshing than he'd like to admit. As she turned to leave, he spoke again, without thinking. "Emily, wait." She paused, looking back at him. "Yes, Mr. Donovan? Call me Alex," he said. "And I'm serious about the offer. I want to work with someone like you. I'm starting a new project, and I think you could be a part of it." Emily studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy where I am." "Thank you, though," she replied, her voice polite but firm. She didn't wait for him to say anything else, simply walked away, leaving Alex staring after her. He couldn't explain why, but the words she had spoken stayed with him. "I'm happy where I am." No one ever said that to him. It was a strange, yet powerful, statement that made him realize how little he knew about the people around him, how little he understood about the world outside of his own. As the night wore on and he left the restaurant, Alex's mind remained focused on Emily. Who was she really? What had led her to this point in her life? He didn't know, but he was certain of one thing. She was someone worth knowing. The days that followed were filled with a strange sense of anticipation for Alex. It wasn't like him to be preoccupied with someone who wasn't actively trying to get his attention, but Emily had managed to do just that. Her composure, her intelligence, and the way she had responded to his challenge had left a lasting impression. Alex tried to push the thought of her aside, focusing on work, but no matter what he did, his mind kept returning to their brief conversation. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him so directly, so honestly, without trying to gain anything from it. For the first time, in a long while, he was intrigued by a person, not because of their connections or what they could offer him, but because they simply seemed real. It had been a week since he had seen Emily, and in that time, Alex had spent more time thinking about her than he cared to admit. He had tried to focus on the upcoming business venture, a new project that could revolutionize his industry, but every time he sat down to work, his thoughts wandered back to her. He found himself wondering about her life, about what had brought her to that moment in the restaurant. Why had she chosen to leave behind a potential career in international languages? What had she sacrificed to help her family? What had made her so resolute in her decision to stay in a job that most people would see as beneath them? Alex was used to people wanting something from him. He was used to being the one who held the power, the one who could offer opportunities, but Emily was different. She didn't want anything from him. That was both refreshing and unsettling. On a Wednesday afternoon, unable to ignore his curiosity any longer, Alex found himself walking into the restaurant again, his footsteps more purposeful than usual. The familiar chime of the door greeted him as he entered, and he immediately spotted Emily behind the counter, taking orders with that same calm demeanor that had intrigued him before. She looked up as he approached, her expression neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly, as if surprised to see him. "Alex," she said, her voice steady. "Back again. I had to come by," he said, his voice unexpectedly sincere. "I thought we should talk." Emily paused, her gaze shifting slightly, as if weighing his words. "What's on your mind?" she asked, setting down the pen she had been holding. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," Alex began, his tone softer than usual. "And I realized something. I want to know more about you. About your story. What made you walk away from a path that many would consider a dream job?" Emily's expression softened for a moment, but only briefly. She was careful, guarded even, but Alex could tell she wasn't dismissing him outright. "I'm not sure what there is to tell," she replied, her voice quiet. "Life has a way of throwing things at you. Sometimes you make decisions that are hard to explain, even to yourself." "I get that," Alex said, leaning slightly closer to the counter. "But I'm curious. What made you walk away from something that seemed so promising?" Emily looked down for a moment, as if contemplating how much to reveal. She took a deep breath before answering. "It wasn't easy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was on track to graduate with a degree in international languages, but then my brother got sick. I had to step in, help my family. It wasn't a decision I took lightly. I thought about it for a long time, but in the end, I had to put my family first." There was a raw honesty in her words that struck Alex deeply. He could see it in her eyes, the pain she had carried with her, the sacrifices she had made. "That's admirable," he said quietly. "I can't imagine having to make that kind of choice." Emily shrugged, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You do what you have to do," she replied. "I don't regret it, but it hasn't been easy." Alex nodded, feeling a sense of respect for her that he hadn't felt for anyone in a long time. There was something about her, something real, that made him want to understand her better. It wasn't just about her past, though. It was about the way she carried herself, the way she approached life with such quiet strength. It was rare for him to find someone who didn't immediately try to impress him, someone who didn't need his approval. Emily was exactly that. She didn't care about his wealth, his status. She wasn't interested in what he could offer her. And for some reason, that made him more interested in her than anyone else he had ever met. He knew he had to learn more, to understand the person behind the calm exterior. "Emily," Alex said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I want to offer you something. I've got a project I'm working on, and I could use someone with your skills, your insight. I'm not offering this because of who I am. I'm offering it because I believe you could bring something valuable to the table." Emily regarded him with a careful look, but there was a flicker of interest in her eyes. She didn't say anything right away, but Alex could tell she was considering it. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for the job," she said after a pause. "I'm happy where I am, but I appreciate the offer." Alex didn't push. He respected her decision, but that didn't mean he was ready to give up just yet. He knew that sometimes, the most unexpected people had the power to change everything. It had been a week since their conversation, and Alex couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He had come to respect her decision to turn down his offer, but that respect didn't mean he was willing to give up. There was something about her that kept pulling at him, something he couldn't explain. It wasn't just her intelligence or her quiet strength. It was the way she made him feel. For the first time in years, Alex found himself wondering if there was more to life than business deals and stock prices. He couldn't ignore the feeling that he was missing out on something real. Emily's decision to stay in her current job, despite her obvious talents, only made her more intriguing to him. He was used to people chasing after him, trying to get into his world, but Emily didn't care about any of that. She had her own life, her own struggles, and yet she was content with who she was. Alex admired that, even though he couldn't fully understand it. One evening, a few days after their conversation, Alex found himself walking into the restaurant again. This time, he wasn't there to offer her a job. He was there because, in a strange way, he felt like he needed to see her again. As he entered, the familiar chime of the door sounded, and he spotted her immediately. Emily was at the counter, taking orders, her focus entirely on the customers in front of her. She didn't notice him at first, and he found himself watching her for a moment. There was something about the way she moved, so purposeful, So confident, yet so unassuming. He didn't want to interrupt her, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this time, he had to do something different. He waited until she was free, then walked up to the counter. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with the same calm expression she always had. "Alex," she said, her voice warm but neutral. "Back again." He nodded, his expression serious. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I know you turned down my offer before, but I wanted to talk to you about something else. Not a job this time, but just, I don't know, a conversation, maybe." Emily raised an eyebrow, clearly curious but still guarded. "A conversation?" she repeated, setting down the pen she had been holding. "About what?" Alex hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure how to put it into words, but he knew he needed to be honest. "About you," he said, his gaze steady. "About why you're here, doing this, when you could be doing so much more. Why you chose this path." Emily's eyes softened, but she didn't answer right away. She was quiet for a moment, as if weighing his words. "It's not as simple as you think," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "People don't always choose their paths. Sometimes, they're just trying to make it through. I'm happy with where I am, but it doesn't mean it's been easy." Alex was taken aback by the honesty in her voice. He had expected her to dismiss the question, but instead, she had opened up in a way he hadn't anticipated. "I get that," he said, nodding slowly. "But I still don't understand. You have so much potential. You could be doing anything. Why stay here?" Emily gave him a small smile, but it was tinged with something sad. "Because sometimes, what you really need isn't what everyone else thinks you should want," she replied. "I'm here because it's what I need right now. It's not glamorous, but it's enough for me." There was a finality in her words, a sense that she had made peace with her choices. Alex stood there for a moment, processing what she had said. It wasn't the answer he had been hoping for, but it was the truth, and in a way, that made him respect her even more. "I think I understand," he said quietly, "but I still believe you're capable of so much more." Emily shook her head slightly. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean I want more right now. Sometimes, just living is enough." Alex found himself at a loss for words. He had spent so much of his life chasing after more money, more success, more recognition. But in that moment, he realized that maybe he had been missing something important. He looked at Emily again, this time with a new understanding. "I think you're right," he said softly. "Maybe it's time for me to start living for something other than just success." Emily's smile widened slightly, and Alex felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the answer he had expected, but it was the answer he needed. And in that moment, he knew that meeting Emily had changed something in him forever. The following week, Alex found himself returning to the restaurant more often. He told himself it was for work, to have a quiet meal away from the constant noise of his office. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was coming back for Emily. He couldn't quite shake the feeling that she had changed something in him. He had always been so focused on the next big deal, the next step to climb in his corporate world. But now, when he sat in the same corner booth of the restaurant, he found his thoughts drifting back to her. Her calm demeanor, her quiet wisdom, the way she had made him rethink his entire approach to life. Emily was different. She wasn't like the other people Alex was used to. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or status. She had her own life, her own set of challenges, and yet she didn't seem to be driven by the same things that drove him. She was content. It was a foreign concept to Alex, who had spent years chasing after success, but he couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, she had it right. Emily didn't know it, but she had become the one person in Alex's life who made him question everything. One evening, Alex arrived at the restaurant after a long day of meetings, and as usual, Emily was there, moving with the same grace and efficiency. She looked up when he walked in, and their eyes met for a brief moment before she went back to her work. Alex found himself smiling without even realizing it. He had become accustomed to her presence, to the way she seemed to effortlessly navigate the chaos around her, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a sense of peace just being in the same room with her. He sat down at his usual spot, the same table by the window, and ordered his meal. As he waited, he couldn't help but think about the conversation they had shared a few days ago. Emily had been so open with him, something that surprised him. She had told him about her sacrifices, her reasons for staying in the job she had chosen, and it had made him respect her even more. Most people would have tried to impress him, to tell him what he wanted to hear, but not Emily. She didn't care about impressing him. She just was. And that authenticity, that honesty, had made her stand out in a world full of people who were constantly trying to prove their worth. When Emily came to deliver his meal, she set it down in front of him with her usual calm smile. "How's everything going?" she asked, her voice warm but professional. Alex looked up at her, the question suddenly feeling more personal than usual. "It's going well," he said, "but I've been thinking about something." Emily raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" "I've been thinking about what you said," he said, leaning back in his chair. "About being happy with where you are. I guess. I've been chasing after more for so long, and I'm starting to wonder if I've been missing something important." Emily smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "You're not the only one," she said quietly. "A lot of people spend their whole lives chasing something, thinking it will make them happy. But sometimes, happiness is right where you are, if you just stop long enough to notice it." Alex was taken aback by her words. It wasn't something he had ever considered before. He had always been so focused on the next step, the next goal, the next success. But in that moment, he realized that maybe he had been too focused on the future and not enough on the present. "You're right," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I've spent so much time looking for the next big thing that I've missed what's right in front of me." Emily nodded, her expression softening. "It happens. Life doesn't always go according to plan, but sometimes that's where the real beauty is. In the unexpected moments, the things we take for granted." Alex found himself reflecting on her words long after she had moved on to take care of other customers. He had always been so focused on achieving more, but now he wondered if there was something else he should be focusing on, something that wasn't tied to his wealth or success. He wasn't sure what that something was yet, but he knew one thing for sure. Emily had opened his eyes to the possibility that there was more to life than just ambition and achievement. As he finished his meal and left the restaurant that night, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a peace tied to success or recognition, but to something deeper, something more personal. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path, one that might not lead to more money or power, but to something far more valuable, contentment. As the days passed, Alex found himself thinking about Emily more and more. He was used to his life being planned out, his days filled with meetings, decisions, and deadlines. But with Emily, things were different. Her words had stayed with him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was seeing the world through a different lens. The way she carried herself, the way she valued simplicity and presence over the constant pursuit of more, made him wonder if he had been missing something all these years. He had always believed that success was the ultimate goal, that the next deal, the next acquisition, would bring him happiness. But now he wasn't so sure. One evening, Alex decided to visit the restaurant again. He didn't have a specific reason this time, other than the fact that he wanted to see Emily again. He walked in, greeted by the familiar chime of the door. He could already see her in the corner of the room, moving through the restaurant with her usual grace. She didn't notice him at first, but as he made his way to his usual table, their eyes met. For a brief moment, something passed between them. Alex wasn't sure what it was. Maybe it was the recognition of something unspoken, or maybe it was just the understanding that their paths had crossed for a reason. Emily walked over to his table, her expression calm, but there was a slight hesitation in her step. "Alex," she said, her voice warm, but still professional. "Back again." Alex nodded, offering her a small smile. "I can't seem to stay away." Emily smiled faintly, but there was something more in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, reaching for her notepad. Alex paused for a moment, his mind racing. He had come here with the intention of asking her something he had been thinking about for days. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his voice softer than usual. "About what you said the other day. About being happy with where you are." Emily looked at him curiously, her pen hovering over the pad. And I think I've been running in circles for too long," Alex said, his words coming out slower, more deliberate. "I've been chasing after success, after more money, more power, more influence. But I'm starting to wonder if it's enough." Emily studied him for a moment, her eyes steady. "It's easy to get caught up in the chase," she said quietly. "But the thing is, the chase never really ends. You get to the next thing, and then there's always something more. It's exhausting." Alex nodded, his gaze dropping to the table. He had always known that on some level, but hearing it from Emily, hearing it so plainly, made it feel like a revelation. I don't know if I can stop chasing, though, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. It's all I've ever known. Emily's expression softened. It's not about stopping, Alex. It's about finding balance. About realizing that you don't have to keep chasing to be happy. You can still go after what you want, but maybe it's about doing it in a way that doesn't leave you feeling empty inside. Alex looked up at her, her words sinking in deeper than he had expected. He didn't have all the answers, but something about what she said made sense. Maybe he had been too focused on the wrong things, too focused on what he didn't have instead of appreciating what he already had. I think I need to learn how to do that, he said, his voice more certain now. Emily smiled, a genuine, warm smile. We all do, she replied. It's not easy, but it's worth it. The conversation lingered in the air as Alex finished his meal, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to rush. He didn't feel the need to check his phone every 5 minutes or to think about the next big deal. Instead, he felt a sense of peace, a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. As he stood up to leave, he caught Emily's eye one last time. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere. For everything. Emily nodded, her smile softening. Anytime, Alex. And as he walked out of the restaurant, he realized that meeting her had been more than just a chance encounter. It had been a turning point, a moment that would shape his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. He was ready to embrace it, to find a new path, one that wasn't defined by the pursuit of more, but by the pursuit of meaning. Over the next few weeks, Alex found himself making more frequent visits to the restaurant. He hadn't intended for this to happen, but something about Emily's perspective had stayed with him. Her words, the idea of balance, of choosing contentment over the constant race for more, had settled in his mind like a quiet echo. At first, he had resisted it, tried to push it away, focusing on his work, his meetings, the usual demands of his high-powered life. But the more time passed, the more he realized he couldn't escape it. He had been living for years in pursuit of success, constantly looking ahead, always thinking about the next big thing, never stopping to appreciate what was right in front of him. He hadn't even realized how exhausting it had been until Emily had pointed it out. It was a slow, almost imperceptible shift at first, but soon he found himself looking forward to his visits to the restaurant. He wasn't just going for the food or the business meetings. He was going because he wanted to see her. He wanted to understand more about her, about why she was so content with the life she had built, despite the challenges she had faced. On one particularly busy afternoon, Alex walked into the restaurant, his mind filled with thoughts of a new project he had been working on. It had the potential to be his biggest success yet, but as he walked through the door, he realized that his mind was no longer just consumed by business. It was consumed by the idea of finding that balance, the balance that Emily had spoken of. He walked over to his usual spot, and as he sat down, he noticed that Emily was just finishing up with another table. She hadn't seen him yet, and for a moment, he simply watched her. There was something about the way she interacted with people, how she made each of them feel like they were the only ones in the room. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just being herself, and it was captivating. When she finally looked up and saw him, she gave him that familiar smile, one that was both professional and warm. Back again, she asked, her tone light, but there was a subtle curiosity in her eyes. I suppose I am, Alex replied, smiling in return. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day. Emily raised an eyebrow, clearly interested. Oh, and what have you been thinking? I've been thinking about balance, Alex said, his voice quieter than usual. I think I've been chasing after the wrong things for too long. More money, more success, more power. But it never really made me happy. I thought it would, but it didn't. Emily's expression softened as she listened to him, her eyes filled with understanding. It's easy to get caught up in the chase, she said quietly. But the chase never really ends, does it? You get to one goal, and there's always another waiting. And then another. It's exhausting. Alex nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders as he heard her speak. He had always known that on some level, but hearing it out loud, especially from someone like Emily, made it feel like a revelation. Exactly, he said, his voice tinged with relief. I've spent so much time focusing on the future, on the next thing, that I've missed out on the present. I've missed out on what really matters. Emily smiled softly, a look of quiet satisfaction in her eyes. "It's never too late to start," she said gently. "You just have to stop for a moment and notice what's around you. Sometimes, the most meaningful things are the ones you've been overlooking." Alex sat back in his chair, letting her words sink in. For the first time in years, he felt like he was starting to see the world differently. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. He didn't want to keep chasing after success at the expense of his happiness. As Emily walked away to take care of another table, Alex watched her for a moment, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, he was starting to understand the importance of balance, the importance of finding contentment in the present. And in that moment, he knew he had Emily to thank for that lesson. Alex had been coming to the restaurant more frequently lately, but today was different. It wasn't just the comfort of the familiar setting or the anticipation of his meal that brought him here. It was something more. He had spent the last few weeks reflecting on his life, on everything Emily had said to him, and for the first time, he felt like he was ready for a change. He didn't know exactly what that change would look like, but he knew it had to start with him. As he entered the restaurant, he noticed the usual hum of activity, the clink of silverware, and the chatter of patrons. It felt different now. The noise didn't seem so overwhelming. It felt quieter, more peaceful. He walked to his usual table by the window, and as always, Emily was there, moving gracefully between the tables. She caught sight of him almost immediately, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Alex," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "Back again." Alex smiled back, his eyes meeting hers. "I suppose I am," he said, his tone lighter than it had been in weeks. "I've been thinking a lot lately." Emily raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "About what?" "About everything," Alex said, settling into his chair. "About the way I've been living my life, the constant pursuit of more, and how that's really been affecting me. And I've realized something. I don't want to keep chasing something I'm never going to find." Emily nodded slowly, her gaze softening. "It's easy to get caught in the cycle of wanting more," she said, her voice thoughtful. "But at some point, you have to. Ask yourself if it's worth it. Is what you're chasing really what you need? Or are you just filling a void that can never be filled?" Alex felt a weight lift off his shoulders as her words sank in. He had been chasing after success for so long, always striving for the next goal, the next deal, the next achievement. But now, for the first time, he was beginning to see that the things he had been chasing weren't bringing him the fulfillment he had hoped for. "I think I've been doing that my whole life," he said, his voice quieter now. "Chasing after something that's always just out of reach." Emily leaned forward slightly, her eyes focused on him with a quiet intensity. "And now," she asked gently, "what are you going to do about it?" Alex paused, considering her question. The truth was, he didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew that he couldn't keep living the way he had been. Something had to change. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "But I know I have to find a different way to live. A way that's not all about success or power or money." Emily smiled, her expression warm and approving. "That's a good start," she said softly. "It's not easy, but it's worth it." Alex nodded, feeling a sense of clarity that he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't sure where this new path would take him, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid to find out. As Emily moved away to attend to other customers, Alex sat back in his chair, letting her words echo in his mind. The future was uncertain, but he no longer felt the need to rush toward it. He didn't have to have everything figured out right away. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. The restaurant, the noise, the world outside. It all seemed so much quieter now, as if for the first time, he had found the peace he had been searching for all along. It had been several weeks since Alex had made the decision to change his approach to life, but something about his visit to the restaurant today felt different. He was no longer the same person who had walked in a few months ago. The constant pursuit of success, the never-ending chase for more. He had let all of that go. It wasn't that he had given up on his work or ambitions. It was just that he had found a way to do it all without losing sight of the things that really mattered. As he sat down at his usual table by the window, he realized that he was finally at peace with himself. For the first time in a long time, his thoughts weren't consumed by work, by numbers, by the next big deal. Instead, his mind was calm, focused on the present. The future didn't seem so daunting anymore. When Emily walked over to his table, she looked at him with the same calm, familiar gaze that had always put him at ease. "Back again, Alex?" she asked with a smile. Alex returned her smile, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt before. "I think I'll be here more often," he said, his voice steady. "I've come to realize that this place, this moment, is enough." Emily's expression softened as she listened to him, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm glad to hear that," she said quietly. "It's easy to get lost in the noise of everything. But sometimes, the quiet moments are the ones that matter most." Alex nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle into his chest. He had spent so much of his life chasing after external validation, but now, he understood that true peace came from within. It wasn't about how much he had, or how successful he was. It was about the choices he made, the way he lived his life, and the people he surrounded himself with. "You were right," Alex said, his voice quieter now. "I've spent too much time chasing after something that never truly brought me happiness. But now, I see that the things I already have, my health, my family, moments like this, they're enough." Emily smiled, a quiet, content smile that spoke volumes. "It's good to see you like this," she said softly. "It's easy to forget, but life is about more than just success or achievements. It's about living, truly living, and appreciating what's in front of you." Alex took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He no longer felt the pressure to be constantly on the move, constantly pushing himself to be more. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. He could just be. "Thank you," Alex said, his voice sincere. "You've helped me see that. I don't think I would have gotten here without you." Emily's smile widened, and for a moment, their eyes locked in a quiet understanding. "I'm glad I could help," she said, her voice warm. As she walked away to attend to other tables, Alex sat back in his chair, looking out the window. The world outside was as busy as ever, but for the first time, he felt like he didn't need to keep up with it. He had found a way to live on his own terms, without the constant noise of ambition and success. And that was enough. As he finished his meal and left the restaurant that night, Alex felt a sense of calm that had eluded him for so long. He didn't know what the future held, but he was no longer afraid of it. He was ready to embrace whatever came his way, knowing that, for the first time, he had everything he needed right here. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest success of all.